Good morning, again from Montgomery, Alabama, and I wanted to just hop on here because I saw that there was a video. I was thinking of this idea, about to sit down, and it came to me that with the report that ICE is looking to buy the warehouses, which is to use warehouses to hold immigrants before detaining them. And I said, that is exactly um, what I saw yesterday at this Legacy Museum, because the museum itself is housed in a warehouse that the U.S. the U.S. government, the states used to house slaves as they were auctioning them or putting them on trains to send to other places for auction and transporting them. But they were all in this warehouse. And so that's why the museum was there. And when you have a museum in a place like that, you feel it. I mean, this is why public history is so important, is we're in a place and we know what happened there. It's just, and so you could feel it. And each time I saw the sign that this is where slaves were held, and you're standing there, you pause, you think about it, it hits you. And so that was just what I was thinking about coming down to talk about. But then I see, as I'm turning it on, the headline in Maryland at this in Baltimore, we knew that once somebody's picked up in Maryland, Maryland does not have immigration detention. There's a law in Maryland called Dignity. It's nicknamed Dignity, not Detention, but it forbids the use of county and state centers to detain immigrants. And that's been around for about 7, 8 years or so, because there used to be. And it was controversial because the conditions in places in Maryland were by and large better than in other places in the country. And plus, there's a lot of lawyers here. So a lot of lawyers were saying, well, wait a minute, I if you put my person in the middle of Pennsylvania somewhere, I can't get to them as much. There aren't as many lawyers. This is the problem when you have a decentralized government, right? When you have something banned in one state but not in another, well, it doesn't, you can just go to that other state to do your cruelty. And unlike something like the death penalty, where if you commit a crime in a state, that's where you're tried, ICE can actually move people around. So they get them out of Maryland but what they do is when they arrest them, they have to figure out where they go, and they stick them in this federal building in Baltimore, where they're talking about here, the 31 Hopkins Plaza, Baltimore. And so, and nobody's really known what's going on, but we know that it's been bad. People have reported about it. Sometimes they're gone in a day, sometimes they're gone in 3 days. And so, and they play games with when they're gone and not gone, because you can file a lawsuit, and Maryland's a much better federal district court to file in than, say, Louisiana, especially, now that the Fifth Circuit is a bad circuit for those cases, and so that's, or other places in the country, so they keep them there. But this person interviewed this former worker for ICE, said it to him, it looked like when they talked about slave ships. And that was also covered. I mean, I've seen that many times in different museums. And again, like, there were these amazing museums in Montgomery, Alabama, in Memphis, in Washington, D.C., they can pull that apart, the African American History Museum, but certainly the Charleston, South Carolina has a great one, and others. And so you can email at immigrant rights podcast at gmail.com, and I can talk more about that if you like, or just comment on YouTube, so, or Spotify. So it's true. We're talking about slave ships. The number 2 million people out of 12 million died en route on slave ships or waiting to get on or what have you. But millions died because people were chained next to each other. That's what this person who worked in ICE was looking at. So the modern day example of that. So yes, going to say, well, it couldn't have been that bad. They weren't, chained throughout an entire ocean trip with, you know, basically hosing them down and et cetera, et cetera. But I guarantee you what they're talking about is lack of use of a bathroom, certainly lack of medical treatment. We've seen that in these detention centers. And I don't think we can emphasize how dangerous they are. And anybody who will not allow a government spot inspection on their jail, we're talking about somebody who's committing human rights violations. There's just no way around it. There's just no way around it that they are creating atrocious conditions. And so I mean, obviously it's alarming. Eric Flack is doing amazing reporting as always. You'll see he I've worked with Eric on he's done 4 reports on a client of mine who was detained and released out of Louisiana. So I've gotten to know Eric as a reporter, and he's very top notch. He asks the great questions, and he's doing it again here. And so this is alarming because this is Baltimore, Maryland, a liberal city in a liberal state. So you can imagine what's going on in states like Texas, where we know we have a monster as a governor who cares nothing, who fought to keep barbed wire on the Rio Grande because crossing with your family to flee whatever you're fleeing is worth physical mutilation of your body. That is sick. And you know what? It's sick, but it's also how were slaves when slaves were marched from, there was one scene in the museum yesterday, which, I mean, we've seen these things before. They come back up to you, but when slaves were marched 100 miles walking from one state to another, they put collars on them with spikes. And so really, the reversion to that, I mean, it's in our DNA to have that. It's in our DNA to have that. You know, it's pretty well known that the Nazis studied how the United States transported slaves on rail cars. And, when we hear this gentleman, I've heard it enough, I'm talking to you now. It's hard. When we shut our eyes down, when we shut this down, we think, oh my God, we're angry. It's also sad because, we know these families. You see these families. If you don't know them personally, your kids have gone to school with them. They're just not talking about it. They're just not talking about it because there's a shame and a stigma. And for them, it's sort of like what's going on in the world that nobody recognizes that this is happening. And it is extremely dehumanizing, degrading, and there's no question that it is hearkening back to the white supremacy of the slave era, to that. And you know, again, we're going to need the quiet rooms. We're going to need the reflection. We're going to need the support of our clergy and anybody else out there who are faith leaders, be they clergy, be they counselors of other things. We're going to need that, and I think that we're going to need school counselors. School counselors are there after shootings and things like that in schools, or when my older son, a student, died naturally at like 13. He was ill, and they have counseling for that because it's a shocking thing. Well, this is a shocking thing. And having represented a high school student recently who was sitting in one of these detention centers, damn well, I called every other day on Zoom, and I brought his teachers in, and I brought his cousins in, and everything else because the community matters. And of course, ICE shut it down after about 4 times doing it. That's the important thing, is that it is our community. And this man is a hero. Please spread the video. Hit this video from Eric Flex. Spread it everywhere. I am, as the president would say, thank you for your attention. And keep it up. Right, we're building a community here. Peace. Thank you.